People like Hillary Clinton don't give a damn about the people they claim are their supporters. They're interested in one thing alone, which is their power, their ability to do whatever they want and to get away with whatever they want, whether it's child trafficking, whether it's launching wars, whether it's accumulating huge amounts of wealth. That's all they care about.
Hey friends, before we get started with our friend Harley Schlanger, just a quick note about your privacy. I'll tell you what, it's astounding to learn that Apple had to force Facebook's VPN out of their own app store because Facebook's VPN was stealing users' data. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. If you're sick and tired of being spied on by Big Brother, get a real VPN that will actually protect your privacy. Visit our friends at virtualshield.com. Virtual Shield VPN is the easiest to use VPN in the world and one of the fastest, and their no-log policy protects users from any data breaches, and they would never ever sell your data like Facebook would. In this month, Virtual Shield is offering 70% off VPN plans and discounts on all premium add-ons, including IdentiSafe, which allows you the ability to block off computer, microphone, and camera access from any unwanted spies or hackers. You have the right to remain private. So check out Virtual Shield VPN. I'll leave the link below this interview. And now we'll turn our attention to our good friend Harley Schlanger. It is so great to have Harley back. Got to tell you, one of the great joys of my life is to be able to speak to somebody as bright and passionate as Harley on a regular basis, and I'm thrilled to have him back today. Harley, thanks for coming back on.
Hi, Sean. Good to be talking with you.
Good to have you back, sir. Hey, I wanted to ask you about Idlib and what Russia is warning are staged chemical provocations coming. And I think what I ought to do for you here first, Harley, is play this soundbite from Vice President Mike Pence, and this was on Fox News Sunday about a week ago. Listen to this.
The United States of America and our allies will take swift and decisive action against any use of chemical weapons in the Idlib province.
I'm going to pause it there, Harley. That was from my video, Never Forget What Exactly. My point in that video being we're told to never forget 9/11. And I said, well, what exactly about 9/11 are we to never forget? How about that it was a false flag? How about that World Trade Center 7 fell at free fall speed at 5:30 in the afternoon? How about the BBC reporting about the collapse of that building 25 minutes early? And how about the dancing Israelis who were detained for, 72 days, something like that, and then sent back to Israel, where they went on a talk show and said our purpose was to document the event? How about we never forget that to document an event, you need pre-knowledge? I say all that, Harley, because I'm very concerned about what may be new chemical attacks in Syria being blamed once again on Assad as a cause to go to war. Your thoughts on Mike Pence, and then I'll play a clip for you from Bolton, who's basically warning the exact same thing.
Well, I think you have to consider the source. You're talking about the neoconservatives who never accepted Trump's decision to pull out of the Middle East, pull the U.S. out of the Middle East, and to end regime change wars. Now, it's somewhat interesting that Pence and also Bolton and Nikki Haley are saying if Assad uses chemical weapons again, the OPCW, which the United States usually cites as an authority, claimed that there was no evidence of chemical weapons use in Duma. And yet, because of the fake news, which comes from the intelligence community and is repeated over and over and over in the mainstream media, people think Assad used chemical weapons on his population when there were no traces of any chemicals that turned up in the investigation. Now, the Russians and the Syrians have said that they have hard intelligence, including photos of groups, including white helmet types, moving chlorine gas into the Idlib province. Obviously, they don't want to be caught again saying the chemical weapons were used with no evidence of chemical weapons. So the Russians are saying there's going to be a staged event that will be used to launch a strike. Now, who gains from a strike? First of all, who would gain from using chemical weapons in Syria? Certainly not Assad, who's now poised to finish off the so-called civil war there. All the remaining, or most of the remaining, Saudi-backed, Israeli-backed, and Obama intelligence community-backed terrorists are now in Idlib province, and they're holding a province of 3 million people hostage. When Assad says his forces are going to move in to end the hostage situation, you have leaders like Bolton and Pence and even Trump saying that we can't let him do that. and Nikki Haley raving about humanitarian consequences when she's involved in covering up the Saudi genocide in Yemen. So what we're seeing here, Sean, is the effect of the coup. If Trump were freed from the Russiagate coup, he would be meeting with Putin. He would be meeting with Xi Jinping. He would be discussing with them not just ending the control of British imperial interests over policies in the Middle East, but also ending the power of the City of London and Wall Street to run a funny money global financial system. We could be in a completely new political, strategic, and economic world. That's why Russiagate was launched, to prevent Trump from doing that. And while he's fighting fairly valiantly against this deep state operation, they're doing everything they can to provoke confrontation and war between the United States and Russia. So I think that's what you get from people like Bolton, who's a war hawk of the highest order. And I don't mean that as a compliment. Nikki Haley, who's doing her version of Johnny Carson's Karnak the Magnificent, saying she knows there's going to be a chemical weapons attack in Syria, which fits in with what you were saying earlier about the Israelis. How do you know something in advance? So, I think that's what we're seeing. It's war by false flag, proxy war, and if we're unlucky, which we very well could be, it won't be a proxy war. It will be a U.S.-Russian showdown, and there's no guarantee that humanity will come out of it.
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate, cup half full, and I think this is a real leap of faith, right? Q says, trust the plan. I saw somebody leave a comment for me. I won't get into it. I don't have it in front of me. But basically the idea of the comment was, Sean, you really dropped the ball on this one. You got to look at the big picture. Do you think Trump doesn't know that the last remaining U.S.-backed rebels, the ones that were backed under Obama, they're all in Idlib province, as you just said. The plan here would be to use a provocation, maybe one that was concocted, to take those final rebels out, sort of working with Russia to help cleanse Syria. Now, I think that's a very much a grand chessboard, sort of 3D chess view that I'm not sure I buy, because John Bolton, who, as you said, is a super hardcore neocon Zionist, was much more on point than Pence, much more specific than Pence. Pence said anyone who uses chemical weapons. That could be the U.S.-backed rebels, the white helmets. Bolton is far more specific. Listen to this clip from Bolton. By the way, Harley, you'll enjoy this. This comes from the NBC News YouTube channel. It was posted on August 22nd. They have 829,000 subscribers, and this video only has 4,700 views, 22 likes, and 88 dislikes. Nobody likes this viewpoint on geopolitics. Listen.
We are obviously concerned about the possibility that Assad may use chemical weapons again. We had hoped that our strikes had created structures of deterrence to convince the Assad regime not to do that. We hope that's right, but just so there's no confusion here, if the Syrian regime uses chemical weapons, we will respond.
I'll pause it there. So, again, these are talking points that are tired, and most of the American people that are awake about this situation and the previous white helmets use of chemical gas that were blamed on Assad, nobody's buying this. Why in the world would Bolton still be running with this narrative? The whole Syria thing has been lost. Russia owns that. I mean, it's over. Now, under Hillary Clinton, I don't believe it would be over for a minute. I believe we'd probably be on the brink of a third world war with Russia over Syria. Trump has played his cards far more cleverly. And your thoughts? Why is Bolton saying this? Why are they clinging to this narrative?
They're doing everything they can to sabotage the shift in the strategic outlook of the United States that Trump has been fighting for. And, I'm saying this as someone who's not a blanket supporter of everything Donald Trump has done, but who recognizes that he came in with a mission. The mission was to overturn the Bush and Obama strategic policy and Clinton's strategic policy. Trump does not like regime change because he sees this as a cause of more instability, of wasting money, and killing people needlessly with no U.S. national security interest. He's opposed it. That's what he ran as one of his key planks of his platform. And the whole Russiagate operation from the beginning was to deter him from sitting down and talking to Vladimir Putin. Why? Well, there's a certain chemistry between Putin and Trump, not because, as the New York Times says, they're both autocrats, would-be dictators, but because they believe in national economic development. They believe in that a stable country is one whose government represents the interests of its people first. And from that standpoint, then you can form bilateral and multilateral relations. Trump and Putin share a lot in common on that. Both of them believe that if they take care of their national interests, and then they can sit down and talk about areas of agreement and disagreement, you can avoid wars. Now, ironically, Trump in that way is much more like Ronald Reagan was. And all these so-called Reaganites who basically said Reagan was prepared for nuclear war with the Soviet Union, it's simply not the case. He believed in this theory of trust but verify and peace through strength. The idea of peace through strength is not military buildup. It's let's do what we have to ensure peace. I think this is the underlying drive of Trump, that he really does believe that we've spent trillions of dollars and lost thousands of lives and killed maybe millions of people for the benefit of a small group of globalists, bankers, and neocons and neoliberals. And that's not in America's interest. So on that basis, he has much more in common with Vladimir Putin, with Prime Minister Conte of Italy, with Viktor Orban of Hungary, and with Xi Jinping of China than he does with weak figures like Angela Merkel and Theresa May, the whole crew of treasonous Democrats, and the Republicans who are the Wall Street warmongering Republicans who work with the Democrats against Trump. So we're seeing a potential for a realignment, a long-term realignment of U.S. strategic policy, which depends on the American people getting the picture that Trump is presenting. And I think if he can adequately present that picture in the next 50 or so days before the midterm elections, we can avoid a so-called blue wave.
Well, I don't think there's any blue wave coming. Again, this is a great bridge to this clip I want to play for you from a Google executive, the chief financial officer that was leaked. And James Woods writes, "This is the CFO of Google breaking into sobs in a confidential internal video taken right after her goddess Hillary Clinton lost the 2016 election. These people contend that there is no political bias at Google." I want to play this for you right now, Harley, because I think when we talk about the deep state, and by the way, the New York Times, the Washington Post, I throw them right into that same basket. CNN, that's all part of the deep state Mockingbird apparatus to take down the president. And I think that New York Times op-ed, that anonymous op-ed that the New York Times really, in an unprecedented way, I think it was unprecedented for them to post that, an anonymous insider saying all these lies about Trump. But the point is that Google, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all biased against this president, against libertarian and conservative speech, against the Constitution itself. And it really defies belief when you understand the epic nature of the crimes, treason, sedition that Hillary Clinton and her cronies are guilty of. Listen to this Google CFO. It really is stunning.
8:30 p.m. on Tuesday night, I was at home with friends and family watching the election returns. And as we started to see the direction of the voting, I reached out to someone close to me who was at the Javits Center where the big celebration was supposed to occur in New York City, somebody who'd been working on the campaign. And I just sent him a note and said, are you okay? It looks like it's going the wrong way. And I got back a very sad, short text that read, "People are leaving, staff is crying, we're gonna lose." That was the first moment I really felt like we were gonna lose. And it was this massive kick in the gut that we were gonna lose. And it was really painful. It did feel like a ton of bricks dropped on my chest, and I've had a chance to talk to a lot of fellow Googlers, and people have said different words, similar concept. How painful this is.
She didn't sob, did she? A little bit of an overstatement there, but Harley, so that was Ruth Porat, the CFO of Google. And here's my point. These people told us going into the election that Hillary Clinton was far and away the leader in the polls. She couldn't be beat. Trump didn't stand a chance. Meanwhile, those of us who live in reality, those of us who followed his rallies or went to his rallies, noticed that 20, 30, 40,000 people would show up to see him speak, and nobody would show up to see her speak. So the reality we were seeing was not matching up with the perceived reality or the narrative that the mainstream media was telling the American people. Why do you suppose the people on the left are still so in love with Hillary Clinton despite her legion of crimes? Do they literally not understand the truth about the New World Order and the Clintons' involvement in it, the Clinton Foundation crimes, child trafficking, pay for play, bribes? She told Goldman Sachs, Hillary did, that she has two positions on every issue, one public, one private. She's a liar, but yet these people still love her. And I think what I'm struggling with is that I don't understand how intelligent people could be so distraught that she's not sitting in the White House. But your thoughts on any of this Google, Twitter, Facebook, mainstream media bias?
There's all this talk about Google and algorithms and that their disappearing of conservative voices has to do with something that's neutral. That's obviously a lie. This is an operation to use social media for a purpose, a political purpose. And I think, as you say, people who are awake know this. The problem is there's still too many people not awake who can't quite figure it out yet. Sean, I was looking at something I wrote in 2010, before the midterm elections in 2010, where, of course, Obama was just smashed. And I wrote that there's an insurgency developing in the country of people who don't believe the elected elites anymore, who are looking for leadership. And as I was reading that, I was thinking, it was pretty obvious to me back in 2010. I think you had some of the same thoughts, but we didn't have a rallying point, certainly not John McCain or Mitt Romney, to defeat Obama. What happened with Trump was someone who, because of his experience in the business world, and also his understanding of the way people think from his media and Hollywood experience, was able to create a resonant response to something which is obvious, which is that people like Hillary Clinton don't give a damn about the people they claim are their supporters. They're interested in one thing alone, which is their power, their ability to do whatever they want and to get away with whatever they want, whether it's child trafficking, whether it's launching wars, whether it's accumulating huge amounts of wealth. That's all they care about. And they're pretending to support the concerns of the American people is exposed as a fraud when you look at the 2016 campaign. Trump went places that Hillary Clinton would never go. And he went to these places because he knew there were real people there who were hurting, who wanted to see a leader who would stand up for them. And that's not going to change. The whole Russiagate, when you talk about people not giving up on Hillary, Hillary's sort of the symbol of this, and she's a useful symbol to use if you're running against her. But she's not the powerful person. She's just one of the puppets that's kept up by these Wall Street, City of London corporate elites who are still trying to cling to power because their financial empire is collapsing. And whole sections of the world are moving away from them. We saw it again in the elections in Sweden last weekend. We saw it in Italy. We see it in Austria, in Hungary, in Poland. We see it with Putin getting 60% of the vote in Russia, or more than that. That there's a rejection of elites who want to tell you what you should think and know and what you should do. And our job is to make sure there's a program that's an alternative to what they're trying to shove down our throats. And during the campaign, Trump articulated it, taking on Wall Street with Glass-Steagall, building infrastructure which had been neglected for years, ending the trade policies which rob the American workforce of jobs while providing super profits for corporations that move offshore. So he's got to get back to that program. At the same time, he's followed through with what he said he would do strategically. He's formed a relationship with Putin. And even though there's some tensions between the US and Russia, like Bolton and Haley and these other non-entities, the U.S. military has been coordinating to some extent with the Russians in Syria. We see very clearly the collaboration that allowed the breakthroughs with North Korea. Where are the people who attacked Trump when he was tough on Kim Jong-un, now that Kim is saying, look, I'm going to denuclearize while you're still in the White House? And I think Trump made a very funny comment the other day. He said, people say I was too nice to Putin. He said, it's the first time anyone's ever said that I'm too nice. So I think if he allows his personality to come out and articulates the policies, the country will be okay. We can't wait for some nameless, imaginary or invisible figures to do something. We've got to be out on the front lines making sure that the American voters tell the elected officials they support Trump's agenda. And that's what the November 2018 elections are about.
Yeah. Well, I agree. And I think we are doing that. But you know what the deal is here, Harley, is when they can't, and when I say they, I mean the enemies, the deep state, the mockingbirds, the far hardcore lefties who are pro-abortion, pro-open borders, anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment, anti-First Amendment. When they can't beat us in the war of ideas, they try to censor us. So now I want to ask you about the EU big brother fascism we're seeing, because again, think Brexit. Think about the truth spilling out in the Great Awakening going global. So many of these countries don't want to be in the EU. They don't want to be ruled by bureaucrats in Brussels, non-elected bureaucrats in Brussels, I would add. So I want to ask you about this. EU approves controversial copyright directive, including internet link tax and upload filter. Those in favor say they're fighting for content creators, but critics say the new laws will be catastrophic. Now, this is Article 13 I'm talking about, guys, and this is exactly what Hillary Clinton and her cohorts would love to bring to the United States. They would love to kill our First Amendment. They would love to bury the truth. Because if you don't have access to truth and all you have access to is the mainstream mockingbird media, CNN, WAPO, and New York Times, they win. The enemies win. Let me read this article to you real quickly, Harley. One paragraph here. The most important parts of this are Articles 11 and 13. Article 11 is intended to give publishers and papers a way to make money when companies like Google link to their stories, allowing them to demand paid licenses. Article 13 requires certain platforms like YouTube and Facebook stop users sharing unlicensed, copyrighted material. This spells the end of fair use, Harley. The fair use clause is a hugely important aspect of our First Amendment rights and of a free press in this country. We ought to be able to quote sources in the stories we tell, in the information that we share with our listeners. If they bring this over to the United States, and by the way, right now, YouTube is grappling with this. Here's the CEO of YouTube, Susan Wojcicki, tweeting, "The opportunity for anyone to earn a living is core to who we are at YouTube. Today's EU copyright vote undermines the creative economy on the web, and we will continue to advocate in the EU and around the world for creators and artists." She's sort of skirting around the main issue here, which is fair use. The First Amendment. We are not part of the EU here in the United States. We have a First Amendment and free speech. But you can see what those bureaucrats in Brussels want to do to free speech around the world, Harley.
Well, I'll tell you something very straightforward. There's no SGT report in Europe. They don't have the access in the German language, Italian language, to the kind of discussion that you bring your listeners every day. It's very, very difficult to establish platforms in Europe that can go against the mainstream line, especially now with some of the EU changes. You look what happened to Tommy Robinson in England, where they think they have a right to shut down anything they don't want to go out. And of course, in the US, when you have YouTube or others starting to censor, what's the excuse given? Well, the First Amendment only applies to government, not to private companies. Well, I think what we're seeing is the fact that the cracks that were exposed by the Brexit vote and the Trump election have become gaping holes in the brainwashing fabric that was used to keep the lid on. We're seeing a break out of that, and they're going to do everything they can to cover up those holes and patch up those cracks. But we saw that with the attempt to shut you down not too long ago. So I think this is the president keeps tweeting about the witch hunt, about the fake news. This is critical for people to understand that you cannot trust anything you get from the mainstream media. And it even spills over into their sports coverage these days. I used to always joke that usually obituaries in sports, they have to be somewhat objective, and it's obviously not the case anymore. So we have to fight for these things. What was the American Revolution about? It's the Constitution. It's the Bill of Rights. The rights given to individual citizens to function, to have their government represent their interests. And if you're part of a minority, you're protected to fight for those interests. And if you're a minority that's about to become a majority, keep at it. Keep the fight going. And don't allow these guys to steal away that which is precious about our American heritage.
Yeah, damn straight. Well, that's all they can do, though, is steal it, because they cannot win in the court of public opinion. They cannot beat us in the global platform. They can't beat us in the public square of ideas. So they're cheating. That's all they have left. And I think the best way to make a tyrant look like a tyrant is to have him act like a tyrant. And that's exactly what these people are doing. They're acting like tyrants. And the truth is spilling out. That's the good news, Harley. And I want to leave folks with these 3 tweets from President Donald Trump on Thursday. And Harley, then I'll give you the final word. President Trump tweeted this: more text messages between former FBI employees Peter Strzok and Lisa Page are a disaster and embarrassment to the FBI and DOJ. This should never have happened, but we are learning more and more by the hour. Others were leaking like mad, he puts in quotes, in order to get the president. He followed that up with this tweet: it is a cesspool of corruption, and the people who did this need to be brought to justice. He's quoting Greg Jarrett. I love how he takes his tweets. He takes his case to the American people via Twitter, Harley. And the CEO, Jack, over there at Twitter does not like it one bit. And then finally, on September 11th, this tweet: we have found nothing to show collusion between President Trump and Russia. Absolutely zero. But every day we get more documentation showing collusion between the FBI and DOJ, the Hillary campaign, foreign spies, and Russians. Incredible, end quote. And he's quoting investigative journalist Sarah Carter on Lou Dobbs. Harley, that's the truth right there. That should be the article that appeared in New York Times. Sarah Carter's articles should be in the New York Times. But the Mockingbird mainstream media continues to run with this absolute debunked lie that the Russians helped Trump win, when we know it wasn't the Russians who leaked the Podesta emails. It was far more likely to be Seth Rich, and it was all done locally. I tell you what, the whole narrative is falling apart, and I think we're going to see perp walks. I really do, Harley. Your thoughts, final words.
I think it's important that Trump declassify all the material that went into the FISA documentation, the lies of the Justice Department, the incestuous interconnections between Strzok and Page and Bruce and Nellie Orr, Christopher Steele, Sir Richard Dearlove of MI6, and then sitting on top of that, spinning a web, Brennan and Clapper. The more that we can get out on this that shows the cesspool of corruption and fraud in the Justice Department, the quicker we can clean up the mess. And I will say that, again, I offer to your listeners, I'm writing articles every week on exposing this corruption and what's behind it and who's running it and the interconnection, the actual collusion between the Obama intelligence community and British intelligence. And by the way, if these things are declassified, more and more will come out on Obama's personal role in running the Get Trump task force of the FBI and the CIA. So I think if people want to get my articles, send me an email at harleysch@gmail.com. That's harleysch@gmail.com. Keep listening to Sean for these updates and go out and fight for the truth, because it's your future that they're trying to take away from you.
Well said. I couldn't have said it better myself. It is truly a fight for truth and a fight for the soul of our country, the fight for the republic, and we all have skin in the game. And thankfully, the witch isn't in the White House, so we all stand a chance as well, Harley. Thanks so much for your time. It's always a pleasure.
Talk to you soon, Sean.
Talk to you soon, my friend. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in. You know how much we appreciate it. If you're having trouble finding my latest videos because YouTube has unsubscribed you or you're not getting notifications, please keep in mind that I always post the latest 2 or 3 videos I've done at the very top of SGTreport.com. And the bonus there is when you visit the site, scroll down, and you're going to get 70 to 80 news items that we share from sources we trust, alt media truth sources that we trust. And of course, the EU would like this to stop, folks. But for the time being, you can get real news 24/7 at SGTreport.com. Thanks so much, guys. God bless.
Mr. Pence, are you aware that ISIS jihadists with American weapons and ammo slaughtered thousands of Aleppo Christians? I'm tired of the propaganda, Mr. Pence. I'm fed up with it. I'm a Christian, and I'm fed up with the propaganda.